A werewolf shifter romance written by Catherine Stewart. Prologue. The scent of roasted boar and cloying, hopeful perfumes hung heavy in the great hall of the Blood Moon Pack, a stark contrast to the hollowness clawing at Alpha Kaelen's gut. Torches spat, hissed, casting flickering, dancing shadows that seemed to mock the forced joviality all around him. This conclave, like the two before it this season, was a charade, a painful, necessary charade. He nodded, a polite smile plastered on his face. As Elder Gorok of the Stone Ridge Pack gestured towards his third eligible daughter that evening, a she-wolf with wide, earnest eyes, and a scent as bland as dried leaves, just bland. "My Myra, Alpha Kaelen," Gorok boomed, his pride puffing his chest. "Strong bloodlines, a temperament as steady as the mountains themselves. She would bring honor to SilverMoon, wouldn't she?" Kaelen looked at her, truly looked searching, for that spark, that soul-deep thrum his dying mother had whispered of, the unmistakable call of a true mate, the other half of his spirit, the missing keystone to his pack's fading vitality. He found nothing, just a polite gaze, an offered future that felt as empty as the winter plains. And his wolf, a restless beast pacing the confines of his soul, remained utterly silent, unimpressed. "She is a credit to your lineage, Elder Gorok," Kaelen managed, his voice smooth, impossibly smooth, betraying none of the acid churning within him. He offered a shallow bow, a dismissal, couched in perfect, painful courtesy. Another polite rejection, another hopeful face falling, another nail in the coffin of tradition. Such a waste. Later, standing alone on a frost-kissed balcony, Kaelen stared out at the indifferent stars. Cold. Distant. Below, the sounds of the feast, the laughter, the boasts, the undercurrent of pack politics, felt a world away. All he could hear was the fading heartbeat of his own SilverMoon Pack. He could feel it in the thinning of their collective aura. He could see it in the weary lines around his beta's eyes. He could almost taste it in the growing scarcity of truly successful hunts. They were diminishing, their spiritual roots withering, dying, without the life-giving nourishment only a true Luna, bonded to her alpha, could provide. The upcoming blood moon, a time of potent magic and ancient reckonings, loomed, not as a promise, oh no, but as a dire, terrifying threat. A cold wind swept across the stone, raising goose flesh on his arms. Shwoo! It carried the scent of pine and distant snow, the familiar tang of his own territory, and with it, a fresh wave of desperate resolve. The old ways failed him. Courtesy failed him. Hope, tethered to tradition, was a dying ember. Almost gone. If his pack was to survive, if he was to survive the crushing weight of his impending failure, then tradition be damned. A new path, however brutal, however unprecedented, had to be forged. The stars, they offered no answers, only cold, glittering, silence. And in that silence, a dangerous idea began to coalesce, sharp and necessary, like a honed claw. He would find his Luna, he would find her, no matter the cost, the whisper of the wind through the pines, usually a friend, a familiar song in my lonely world. But then, a branch cracked, too sharp, too close. Without thinking, my hand was on the smooth, cold comfort of my hunting knife, my body tensing, just a fat squirrel. Its tail a question mark before it scampered up an ancient oak. Still, my heart thumped, like a scared rabbit against my ribs. Because of that, the quiet of the deep woods always felt a little bit like a trap, a place where shadows could hide teeth. Years. So many years had passed since the screams, since the fire, since the smell of burning homes and wolf fur that still woke me up choking some nights. Ugh. to make things worse. The only thing I had left of my mother, of my pack, was the smooth stone pendant I always wore hidden under my tunic, the moon's tear. She'd pressed it into my palm, her eyes wide with a terror I was too young to understand, but old enough to never forget. "Keep it safe, Elara," she'd gasped. "Always." Why was it so important? I never knew. It was just hers, and now mine. Truth be told, living like this, always looking over my shoulder, it wasn't much of a life, was it? My only real goal each day was to see the next sunrise, to find enough food to keep going, and to stay far, far away from any organized pack. Because of that, the stories of the free lands, somewhere beyond the sunken mountains, were like a little spark of warmth in the endless cold, a place where a rogue could just be. No alphas, no pack laws, no questions. Yet, was it just a dream? Could such a place even exist in a world carved up by snapping jaws and dominant roars? I tried to push the thought away. Hope. Hope was a dangerous thing for someone like me. It made you careless. No matter how hard she tried, the forest sometimes felt too big, too empty. I remembered once a story my mother told, a silly tale about a wolf who chased the moon, thinking he could catch its light in his paws. Back then, I'd laughed, curled safe beside her. Now, the moon often felt like my only companion, its silvery light painting the trees in shades of bone and ghost. Deep down, she knew the truth. This wasn't living. It was just waiting. Waiting for Vorlag to finally find me, or waiting to fade away like a whisper myself. Maybe it was fate that I was so good at staying hidden, so good at being alone. My senses were sharp. Every rustle, every distant scent told me a story. I could smell rain coming hours before it fell, feel the shift in the earth when a big herd was moving nearby. This was my world now, the feel of damp earth under my bare feet, the taste of wild berries, the constant thrum of watchfulness. Lately, though, the whispers on the wind weren't just about weather or game. Oh no. They carried a new kind of tension. Stories of packs growing restless, their territories shrinking, their alphas making desperate choices. I'd seen signs of it myself, game scarcer in some parts, the old neutrality of certain borders fraying. What did it mean when the big packs started to hurt? Did their pain trickle down to even the lone wolves, the ones like me who wanted nothing to do with their power games? She didn't know what scared her more. Vorlag finding her, or getting caught in the crossfire of some squabbling alphas. I once stumbled upon the edge of a SilverMoon patrol years ago. They were disciplined, strong. Their alpha said to be a just one. But even so, the scent of their sheer pack power had made my own wolf shrink back. All packs were a threat in the end. Because, they demanded. They took. They controlled. And control. Control was just another word for a cage. That night, as I gnawed on a tough strip of dried deer meat, a howl unlike any I'd heard before sliced through the cold, clear air. It wasn't the mournful song of a lone wolf or the playful yips of pups. No. Instead, this was a chorus, structured, carrying far on the wind, and it vibrated with something urgent, something demanding. As if summoned, my head snapped up, my own wolf stirring uneasily beneath my skin. A low growl building. The sound seemed to pull at something deep inside me. A forgotten instinct. It came from the direction of the SilverMoon territory, the lands I was trying so hard to sneak through quickly. What's worse, the howls were answered by others, closer than they should be. A shiver, cold and sharp, traced its way down my spine. Were they hunting? Or calling? My hand went to the moon's tear. It felt a little warmer than usual against my skin. Probably just my imagination, right? Come morning! I decided to move faster, push harder. The shortcut through the SilverMoon lands was risky, always had been. But the thought of going the long way around, with that strange howling echoing in my memory, that felt even worse. So, I packed my few belongings, my knife, my flint, the last of my dried meat. As the wind shifted, it brought a new scent, faint but unmistakable. Pack wolves. SilverMoon, by the sharp, piney tang of them. And they were close. Too close. Before she could move, a figure stepped out from behind a thicket of ironwood. Then another, and another. Sentinels. 3 of them, big, hard-eyed. Not the usual border guards I'd occasionally glimpsed from afar. Oh no. These ones. These ones looked like they were hunting something specific. And they were looking right. At me. Her heart skipped. My escape route, the one I'd scouted so carefully and had just vanished. They hadn't seen me yet. Not truly. Maybe, if I stayed perfectly still, just for a moment. But then, one of them, the biggest one, with a scar that split his eyebrow, lifted his head and sniffed the air, his gaze sweeping methodically through the undergrowth. And just like that, everything changed. His eyes, cold as a winter sky, locked onto mine. The moment their eyes locked, there was no more hiding, no more running, not from this. A beat later, he let out a short, sharp bark, a signal. With every heartbeat, my old fear, the one that tasted like ash and blood, rose up, trapped. They moved then, not with the rush of an attack, but with the slow, deliberate confidence of hunters who knew their prey was cornered. Which meant they weren't just a random patrol. This was something else, something new. And I had a terrible sinking feeling. It had everything to do with me. My hand tightened on my knife, my knuckles white, but deep down, I knew. What could one rogue do against 3 battle-hardened pack sentinels? Still, I wouldn't go easy. Never. The big sentinel with the scarred eyebrow, the one whose eyes had locked onto mine, didn't shout. Instead, he just nodded once to the others. And then, they started to move. Not fast, like a striking snake, but slow. Like wolves circling a deer they knew couldn't escape. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum. I wanted to run, to disappear into the trees I knew so well. But then, where would I go? They were everywhere. Their pine scent suddenly thick in the air, cutting off every path. Because of that, my hand, still clutching my knife, trembled just a little. This was it then. The end of my running. At least for now. What would they do to a rogue caught on their land? Would they even ask questions first? One of them, younger but just as big, finally spoke, his voice a low rumble. Alpha's decree, rogue, all unmated females this age. He gestured vaguely at me. Report to the Enclave, no trouble and you won't get hurt. Decree? I managed, my voice rougher than I wanted. I follow no Alpha's decree, I'm just passing through. I tried to sound strong, to sound like I wasn't terrified. It was a lie, of course. Deep down, she knew the truth. They wouldn't care. The scarred one chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. Passing through, eh? Funny, that's what they all say. Still, orders are orders. He took another step. As if pulled by a string, my body tensed further. The knife, rogue, drop it, or we take it. I thought of my mother, of the moon's tear hidden safe beneath my tunic. I thought of Vorlag. And just like that, a different kind of fire lit inside me. Not just fear, but anger, hot and sharp. You'll have to, I spat. What followed was a blur. I lunged, not at the scarred one, but at the younger one, hoping for surprise. But then, He was a pack wolf, trained, strong. He met my lunge, not with claws, but with a heavy shoulder that sent me staggering. Moments later, my knife was gone, skittering across the dead leaves. And then, strong hands gripped my arms, rough, bruising. They tied my wrists with a leather thong, tight enough to make my fingers go numb. Because of that, I finally stopped fighting, a cold dread washing over me. This was real. This was happening. My only goal now? Stay alive. Watch. Wait. Maybe, just maybe, I'd find a way out of this. The march to their enclave, their home, felt like a walk to my own cage. With every step he took, and his companions took, the forest I loved felt more like a prison closing in. Truth be told, the SilverMoon enclave wasn't what I expected. I'd imagined a dark, smoky den full of snarling wolves. Instead, it was a large open clearing with sturdy wooden buildings nestled amongst ancient trees. Still, the air thrummed with a tension that made my skin prickle. Dozens of females, she-wolves of all shapes and colors, were gathered there, huddled in small, nervous groups. Some looked angry, like me. Others looked hopeful. Could any wolf truly hope for anything good from a forced summons? It made no sense. More importantly, a path was cleared to a slightly raised platform at one end of the clearing. And then, I saw him. The Alpha. Kaelen. I'd heard whispers of his name before. He was big, powerful even from this distance, his dark fur gleaming. He wasn't shouting or strutting. Rather, he just stood there, his gaze sweeping over each female as she was brought before him, a deep weariness in the set of his shoulders that even I could see. One by one they went up. One by one he'd look, truly look, and then a small, almost invisible shake of his head, and the female would be led away, her face falling. What was he looking for? What did he want? As the silence stretched, broken only by the rustle of leaves and the nervous coughs of the waiting she-wolves, my own fear began to curdle into a grim sort of curiosity. This Alpha, he didn't look like Vorlag. Vorlag was all sharp edges and cruel delight. This one, he just looked tired, burdened. Because of that, a tiny, unwelcome part of me felt a sliver of something that wasn't hatred. It was confusing. Before she could move, or try to understand that feeling, a sentinel near me barked, "Next!" And then, a rough hand shoved me forward, out of the crowd, towards the platform, towards him. Her body moved on instinct, resisting, but their grip was like iron. My heart began to pound again, a wild, frantic rhythm. This was it, the moment of something. I didn't know what, but every instinct I had screamed that my world was about to tilt on its axis. Did he know? Did he have any idea what kind of hornet's nest he was stirring by bringing a rogue like me into the heart of his pack? In the span of a breath, I was standing before him. Alpha Kaelen. He was even bigger up close, his scent, wild pine, rich earth, and something else, something overwhelmingly alpha, washing over me, making my knees feel weak. And then, he looked up. The moment their eyes locked, everything else faded. The noise of the enclave, the fear and the anger, it all just stopped. His eyes weren't cold like the sentinels. Oh no, they were golden, like sun-warmed honey, but with a storm brewing deep inside them. And in that moment, something inside me shifted, cracked open. A jolt, hot and sharp as a lightning strike, shot through me, from the tips of my toes to the roots of my hair. My wolf, the wild, wary creature I kept chained deep inside, reared up with a silent howl, a sound of pure, terrified recognition, a rue. As if pulled by a string, my gaze was caught, trapped by his. The moon's tear beneath my tunic suddenly burned, seared against my skin like a brand, What was this? What was happening to me? Before either could speak, Kaelen staggered back a step, his own eyes widening, that weariness I'd seen vanishing, replaced by a look of utter shock. A low sound rumbled in his chest, too deep for a human, too raw for a simple wolf. Mine. The word wasn't spoken, but it slammed into my mind, into my very soul, as clearly as if he'd shouted it. Her world tilted. Mine? No, I was no one's. Her breath caught. This couldn't be happening. A mate? An alpha mate? It was my worst nightmare. You... Kaelen finally rasped, his voice thick, his hand reaching out. Not in threat, but like he couldn't stop it. As if fate demanded it. My own hand flew to the moon's tear, a desperate need to protect something. Stay away from me, Alpha. I choked out, my voice trembling, taking a clumsy step back. Without warning, just as his fingers brushed my arm, a piercing war cry ripped through the stunned silence of the enclave. Chaos erupted, screams, the clash of claw on claw. And then, a new scent hit me. Vile, and terrifyingly familiar. Vorlag. He was here, a dark shape, an alpha I knew too well, lunged from the chaos, his eyes blazing with triumph, fixed right on me. There you are, little wolf, Vorlag snarled, his voice a whip crack. And the moon's tear finally... Before I could even scream, Kaelen moved. He became a blur of fur and fury, a golden-brown wall of protective rage between me and the monster from my past. You will not touch her, Vorlag! Kaelen roared, and the sound shook the very trees around us. The world outside the Alpha's den, a blur of shouting wolves, the clash of fighting, and the terrifying scent of Vorlag, mixed with fresh blood. But then, strong arms, Alpha Kaelen's arms, had bundled me, half-dragged, half-carried away from the worst of it. And then, I was here, trapped. The den was big. Not a cave, like I'd half expected, no. Built into the side of a hill, warm with a central fire pit and rich with the scent of pine, old leather, and him, Alpha Kaelen. It was like breathing him in. And my wolf, the traitorous beast, actually seemed to settle? As if the world narrowed. This place, his scent, it felt like the only solid thing in a world gone mad. To make things worse, he'd posted 2 huge guards outside the heavy wooden door. A prison, no matter how many soft furs were thrown over the stone ledges. Deep down, she knew the truth. This was for my own good, or so he probably thought. Vorlag had come for me, for the moon's tear that still felt strangely warm against my skin. Because of that, Kaelen, this alpha who my soul apparently screamed was my mate, a horrifying thought, was now my jailer. He'd come back later, his dark fur still carrying the faint metallic tang of battle, a fresh gash healing on his forearm. He didn't speak, just looked at me, his golden eyes intense, unreadable. Under the weight of his stare, I wanted to shrink, to snarl, to run. I did none of those things. I just stared back, my heart a wild bird against my ribs. What now? What did he expect from me? He finally spoke, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the floor. You are not safe out there, Elara. My name. When her name left his lips, it sounded different. Not a command, not a threat, just my name. Still, I flinched. And I'm safer in here? I shot back, my voice tight. With you? With your pack? He took a step closer. With every step he took, my instinct screamed. Vorlag will not stop. He wants you. He wants that. He nodded towards my chest, where the tear lay hidden. How did he know? Did all alphas have some kind of magic sight? It was another chain, another way they controlled everything. This den is warded, secure, he continued. You will stay here, until I can guarantee your safety. Guarantee? I laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. No alpha guarantees anything but trouble. Her body moved on instinct, pacing the length of the den like a caged animal. I had to get out. I had to. That night, after he left, posting those same 2 mountains of fur outside my door, I started planning. This alpha Kaelen might be different from Vorlag, but a cage was still a cage, and I'd die before I let myself be kept in one again. Because freedom. Freedom was all I had ever truly wanted. Was it too much to ask? No matter how hard she tried, the den felt smaller with each passing hour. The 2 guards outside, always there, silent, watchful. My first real attempt to escape was clumsy, desperate. I'd waited until the dead of night, when the enclave was quiet, the moon a pale sliver in the sky. I'd found a loose stone in the back wall, something I'd worried at for hours. But then, just as I managed to pry it out, creating a tiny dark opening to the cool night air, a shadow fell over me. Kaelen. He hadn't been in the den. How did he know? Going somewhere, Elara? His voice was soft, too soft, and it made the hairs on my arms stand up. I spun, a snarl ripping from my throat before I could stop it. Grrr! Get away from me! He didn't move, just watched me. Those golden eyes filled with something I couldn't read. Was it anger? Disappointment? She didn't know what scared her more. This is not a prison, he said, his voice still quiet but with an edge of steel now. It is for your protection. Vorlag is still out there. My pack suffered losses because he came for you. Guilt, sharp and unwelcome, pricked at me. Because of that. My anger faltered a little. It was true, wasn't it? I brought this danger. I didn't ask him to come for me, I cried, my voice raw. I didn't ask for any of this. Not your protection, not your... this bond! The word felt like poison on my tongue. Kaelen took a step closer then, and, with his scent in the air, stronger now, my wolf whined, a pathetic sound I hated. He reached out, slowly, like he was approaching a frightened animal. I know you didn't ask for it, Elara. Neither did I. But it is here, between us. His fingers brushed my arm, the one not bruised by his sentinels, as fire bloomed beneath her skin. From that simple touch, I snatched my arm away. Don't, I whispered, my voice trembling. Just don't. He sighed, a heavy sound, and for the first time, I saw the deep lines of exhaustion around his eyes, the true weight of his alpha burden. Maybe it was fate that he looked so human, so vulnerable in that moment. Instead of pressing, he just nodded. Get some rest. We will talk more come morning. He turned and left, the guards outside resuming their post. And I was alone again, with my fear, my confusion, and the ghost of his touch still burning on my skin. What kind of game was he playing? Why wasn't he just forcing me? That's what alphas did, wasn't it? Kaelen walked away from his den, the scent of Elara, wild, defiant, and undeniably his mate, clinging to him. His wolf was a mess of conflicting instincts, the urge to soothe her, to claim her, to lock her away where nothing could ever touch her again. But then, he'd seen the raw terror in her eyes, the way she flinched from his touch. That wasn't how a mate should look at her alpha. He knew, deep down, that the aggressive, dominant approach some alphas favored would only shatter her further. Vorlag had already done enough damage. And then, there was his pack. He'd heard the whispers. Rogue. Dangerous. Bad luck. He'd already had a sharp exchange with Elder Voltan earlier that day. She is an unknown, Kaelen, Voltan had argued, his jowls quivering. A wild thing. She brought Vorlag to our doorstep. How can such a creature be fit to be our Luna? Kaelen's response had been a low growl that promised pain. She is my mate, Voltan, and you will afford her the respect due to the future Luna of SilverMoon, or you will answer to me. Still, the elder's words echoed. He had to protect Elara not just from Vorlag, but from the fear and suspicion within his own pack. Because of that, he needed her trust, or at least a truce. Forcing her would gain him nothing but a broken mate and a divided pack. So, he would try a different way. Patience, understanding. He just hoped he had enough of both, and that she wouldn't make it. Impossible. What a mess. Come morning, Kaelen returned. He brought food himself, roasted rabbit, much better than my own efforts, and a small bowl of fresh berries. He didn't enter the main part of the den, just set it near the entrance. And then, he spoke, his voice calm. Elara, will you at least eat? I eyed him from the shadows where I'd huddled. My stomach growled, loudly. Despite that, I didn't move. Trusting him, even for food, felt like a surrender. He sighed again. Look, I understand you're scared and angry. You have every right to be. But you need to eat, and we need to talk. Not as alpha and captive, but as two wolves caught in something neither of us expected. His words, they were not what I expected. Two wolves caught in something? Was that how he saw it? It was disarming. No matter how hard she tried to hold on to my pure rage, a sliver of confusion, of something else, pushed through. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't Vorlag. But that didn't mean he wasn't still a cage. The space between them burned with unspoken questions. Could he ever understand what it meant to be truly free? And then to have that stolen? And could I ever understand what it meant to be bound? The scent of the rabbit. It was making my head spin. With a growl still rumbling in my throat, I slowly crept forward. This wasn't trust, not yet. It was just survival. For now. The next few days passed in a blur of forced closeness and wary distance. And then came the patrol. Kaelen had insisted I needed to see the territory, to understand its defenses, though I suspected it was more about getting me used to his presence, to the pack. He assigned two of his calmest warriors, Lyra, not the elder's daughter, but a strong she-wolf with kind eyes, and a quiet male named Finn to escort me with him. We were on the northern ridge, the wind cold and biting when the Shadowclaw scouts attacked. Without warning, they were on us, 4 of them, lean and hungry-looking. My old instincts, the ones that had kept me alive for years, surged. Before she could move, with a plan, Lyra was down. A snarl ripped from her as a Shadowclaw lunged. Kaelen roared, a sound that shook the rocks, and met 2 of them head-on. But then, the 4th one, sneaky, was circling around, aiming for Finn's exposed flank while he was busy. Without thinking, I moved. I was faster than Finn, more agile from years of dodging. I launched myself at the circling wolf, my knife, which Kaelen had surprisingly returned to me for the patrol, flashing. It wasn't a killing blow, just a deep gash on its leg that made it howl and stumble back. In that moment, as I stood panting over the surprised Shadowclaw, Kaelen finished his own fight, his golden eyes finding mine across the small, bloody clearing. There was something new in them. Surprise. And something else. Respect? Later. After the remaining Shadowclaws had fled and Lyra's wounds were bound, Kaelen walked beside me, the silence less tense than before. The moon's tear felt warm again, a steady pulse against my skin. He finally spoke, his voice quiet. You fight like a true SilverMoon, Elara. Or perhaps, he paused, a small, almost smile touching his lips. They should learn to fight like you. Her chest ached, with a sudden confusing mix of pride and something softer. His praise, so unexpected, so freely given, landed like a spark on dry tinder. What was I supposed to do with that? He was still the alpha, my captor, my fated mate. And now, someone who looked at me like I was more than just a problem to be solved. As the sky darkened, painting the mountains in shades of purple and blood, I didn't have an answer. I just knew that everything I thought I understood about alphas, about packs, about myself, was starting to unravel. And I didn't know if that was a good thing or the most dangerous thing of all. Kaelen's words from that day on the ridge, that small, almost smile, the unexpected praise, they echoed in my head, a strange song I couldn't quite forget. Because of that, the days that followed felt different. Not only that, but the way he looked at me sometimes when he thought I wasn't watching. It wasn't like an alpha sizing up a possession anymore. Instead, it was softer, more questioning, like he was just as confused by all this as I was. Still, I kept my walls up, high and strong. Because trust was a luxury a rogue couldn't afford, especially not trust in an alpha, no matter how complicated he was making things. I spent a lot of time in his big den, mostly alone. He was busy with pack business, trying to fix the damage Vorlag's earlier attack had caused. And I paced. And I thought. And I touched the moon's tear, which seemed to pulse with a faint warmth more often now, especially when Kaelen was near or when my thoughts drifted to him. What was this thing? Why did my mother say to keep it safe, with such terror in her eyes? One afternoon, I found Kaelen in a smaller chamber off the main den, a place filled with old scrolls and carved stones. He was hunched over a tattered piece of hide, his brow furrowed in concentration. He didn't hear me enter at first. The air smelled of old parchment, dust, and his own strong scent of pine and earth. As if pulled by a string, I found myself looking over his shoulder. The markings on the hide were ancient, symbols I'd never seen before. "What is that?" I asked, my voice startling him. He looked up, his golden eyes meeting mine. For a moment, just a moment, the alpha was gone, and there was just Kaelen, tired, searching. "Old lore," he said, his voice a bit rough. "Pack histories. I was looking for any mention of pendants like yours, of your bloodline, if there were records." My bloodline? Why would my family, a small band of wandering healers and herbalists, be in SilverMoon lore? Unless what Vorlag wanted wasn't just me, but something my family was, something they carried in their very veins. Her heart skipped. Kaelen sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. There are fragments, legends, about a lineage tied to the moon's deepest magic, bearers of a tear that could soothe a wounded land, or amplify Luna's true power to protect her pack. He looked directly at me then. The legends say only a true daughter of that line, willingly bonded, could ever hope to understand its full measure. My stomach twisted. Willingly bonded? A Luna? This was worse than a cage. It was a destiny I wanted no part of. "That's just old stories, Alpha," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Superstition." But deep down, she knew the truth. The warmth of the tear, its strange pulses, the way Vorlag hunted me. It wasn't just superstition, was it? Before either could speak further, a frantic shout came from outside. "Alpha! Riders! A message from the Shadow Claws!" Kaelen was on his feet in an instant, the Alpha back in full force, his eyes blazing. And just like that, everything changed. The air thickened with dread. Vorlag. He wasn't just a memory anymore. He was here, and he was making his next move. What new horror would this message bring? What followed was a chilling demand. Vorlag, in his arrogant message delivered by a sneering Shadowclaw rider, didn't ask for my surrender. No. Instead, He declared that the SilverMoon pack was harboring a stolen artifact of great power. My moon's tear, he meant, and me. Its unworthy keeper. He gave Kaelen 3 days to deliver both me and the Tear of Night, as he called it, to him at the old Bloodwood altar. If not, he promised to unleash a torrent of destruction upon SilverMoon, a feast of screams and sorrow, starting with their most vulnerable settlements. To make things worse, he included a small, crudely carved wooden bird, just like the ones my little brother used to make before Vorlag killed him. It was a message within a message. He knew me, he knew my past, and he knew how to twist the knife. My legs felt like water. That bird. Oh gods, that little bird. My carefully built walls. They didn't just crack, they shattered. Kaelen had read the message aloud to his war council, his voice like granite, his fury a palpable force in the room. But then, when he looked at me, saw the broken bird in my trembling hand, something in his golden eyes shifted, concern, and a rage that felt personal, not just for his pack, but for me. As the silence stretched, I wanted to tell him to do it, to give me to Vorlag, to save his people. Because what was one broken rogue against an entire pack? Yet, the words wouldn't come. Maybe it was fate. Or maybe it was the memory of Kaelen throwing himself in front of me before, but a tiny, stubborn spark of defiance still flickered. Could I really just give up? After all this running? After all my family had lost? He thinks to break us with fear, Kaelen finally said, his voice low, addressing not just his council but me. He thinks we will sacrifice our own. He is wrong. He met my eyes. You are SilverMoon now, Elara, whether you wished it or not, and we do not abandon our own. His words. They hit me harder than any threat from Vorlag. SilverMoon, my pack, her world tilted. It was too much. Without another word, I turned and fled the council chamber, the little wooden bird clutched in my hand, his declaration echoing in my ears. He couldn't mean it. He couldn't. Could he? Deep down, she knew the truth. His protection. This claim. It was just another kind of chain. Prettier, perhaps, but a chain nonetheless. And Vorlag was coming. And it was all my fault. That night, Vorlag made good on his threat. Without warning, scouts brought word. The northern farming settlement, the one furthest from the enclave, the one filled with young families and elders, was under brutal attack. Not a raid. An annihilation. Vorlag wasn't waiting for the deadline. He was making an example. The air thickened with Kaelen's furious roar, a sound that vibrated through the very stones of the den where I hid, trying to make myself small. He gathered his warriors, his face a mask of terrible resolve. He had to go. He had to try and save them. Despite that, before he left, he came to me. "Stay here, Elara," he commanded, his golden eyes blazing with a desperate light. "With my personal guard, do not leave this den, no matter what you hear." But what about you? The words were out before I could stop them. Her voice trembled. Under the weight of his stare, a different kind of fire bloomed in his eyes. "I will protect my pack, and I will come back for you." And then, he was gone, a whirlwind of dark fur and righteous fury, leading his warriors into the blood-soaked night. I was alone with his guards, listening to the distant sounds of battle, the faint screams carried on the wind. And then, a new sound, closer, scratching. At the back of the den, the place where I'd found that loose stone before. Vorlag, or his minions. They weren't just attacking the settlement, were they? They knew where Kaelen's den was. They knew I was here. My heart skipped. Kaelen was gone. His strongest warriors were gone, and they were coming for me. In that moment, I wasn't a confused rogue or an unwilling mate. I was prey, and the hunters were at the door. My body moved on instinct. My knife was in my hand. The moon's tear pulsed, a frantic hot beat against my skin. As the silence roared around the scratching, I knew one thing. I wouldn't be taken easily. Not again. Never again.
The scratching at the back of the den stopped. And then... silence. A heavy, waiting kind of silence, worse than any snarl. My knife felt slippery in my palm. With every heartbeat, I braced myself. The 2 guards Kaelen had left outside my main door. They were good, I knew that. But Vorlag was a monster of shadows and cunning. What followed was not the crash I expected. Instead, a faint scraping sound came from above, near the smoke hole in the roof of the den. Her heart skipped. They weren't trying to break in, they were trying to drop in. Before she could move, a dark shape blotted out the faint moonlight from the smoke hole. And then, another, smaller, quicker. Not Shadowclaw warriors, no, something else. Something slithering. Snakes. Vorlag was sending snakes. A wave of pure cold terror, more primal than any fear of wolves, washed over me. I hated snakes. Hated them with a terror that went bone deep. A memory from childhood I couldn't quite grasp, but that left me paralyzed. As if pulled by a string, I backed away, my knife useless against this. One landed with a soft thud, then another, their scales rasping on the stone floor. They were big, dark, and their eyes glittered like Vorlag's. My breath caught. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. Just like that. My fierce resolve from moments before crumbled into a little girl's nightmare. Maybe it was fate, that just as one reared up, its tongue flicking, the main door to the den burst open. Kaelen, he wasn't supposed to be back. He was fighting at the settlement. His scent, wild pine and fury and something else. Mate filled the den, a shocking wave of comfort even through my terror. He took in the scene in a single blazing glance. Me, cornered, the snakes, advancing. A growl rose in her throat. Or maybe it was his. A sound so deep, so savage it shook the very walls. Elara. When her name left his lips, it was a lifeline. He moved then, a blur of dark fur and pure alpha rage, not in his wolf form but with a speed that wasn't entirely human. He didn't have a weapon against the snakes either, but he didn't seem to need one. He was just power, motion, fury. The fight at the settlement had been a bloody distraction, a feint. Because of that, a cold dread had seized Kaelen the moment the main Shadowclaw force there had suddenly retreated. Elara. Vorlag wasn't just trying to break his pack, he was trying to isolate her, to take her when Kaelen was occupied. He'd raced back to his den, his heart a frantic hammer against his ribs, his fastest warriors struggling to keep pace. What's worse? When he arrived, the 2 guards at her door were dead. Necks snapped. Silent. Vorlag's work, or someone equally skilled in stealth. His world tilted, if anything happened to her. Without thinking, he'd burst through the door, his alpha senses already screaming a warning before his eyes fully registered the scene. Elara, pale as death, frozen against the far wall, and the dark, coiling shapes on the floor. Snakes, Vorlag's particular brand of sadistic signaling. Anger, hotter and more potent than any he'd ever known, exploded through him. Not just for the attack, but for the terror he saw in her eyes. She was his mate, and Vorlag was using her deepest fears against her. His body moved on instinct. He wasn't thinking of pack strategy or alpha responsibility. Only Elara. He grabbed a heavy fur from a ledge, sweeping it down, scattering the vipers. His movements precise, economical, deadly. One lunged. He crushed its head beneath his heavy boot without a second thought, his focus already on the next. He could feel her terror, a raw, jagged thing that tore at the edges of their new, fragile bond. Because of that, he fought, Not just the snakes, but her fear, too. His presence a shield. Soon after, the last snake lay broken. The silence roared in the den, broken only by Elara's ragged breathing and his own harsh gasps. He turned to her, his chest aching. She was still pressed against the wall, trembling like a leaf, her eyes huge and dark. "Elara," he said, his voice softer now, gentler than he thought himself capable of. "It's over. They're gone. You're safe." He took a step towards her, and then another. He needed to touch her, to reassure himself she was real, unharmed, to reassure her. Would she let him? After this? After everything? In the quiet that followed, Kaelen's destruction of the snakes, my legs finally gave out. I slid down the wall, my knife clattering to the floor. Safe. He said I was safe. But then, was I? Safe from Vorlag's snakes, yes, but safe from him. Safe from this thing that arced between us, hot and undeniable. Her thoughts spun. He was walking towards me, his golden eyes softer now, the rage replaced with a raw concern that made my chest ache in a different way. He knelt, his nearness overwhelming, his scent a dizzying mix of safety and danger. His hand reached out, not to grab, but palm up, an offering. Her bones remembered him, or something like him, from a dream, a forgotten instinct. "You're trembling," he murmured. His voice, it was like a warm blanket. I hate snakes," I whispered, the admission feeling foolish after facing down Shadow Claw warriors. A small, almost sad smile touched his lips. I gathered. He didn't press. He didn't demand. He just waited. And she let it happen. Slowly, hesitantly, I put my trembling hand in his. His fingers closed around mine. Warm, strong, surprisingly gentle. As fire bloomed beneath her skin, not from fear this time, but from something else. Something new and terrifyingly tender. I looked into his eyes. The alpha was there. Yes. The power. The command. But deeper, I saw Kaelen, the wolf who looked burdened, the male who had just faced death to protect me from a childhood nightmare. And in that moment, something inside me, something I thought had died with my family, flickered. A tiny, fragile ember of trust. Could it be? Her soul answered, with a tremor that had nothing to do with snakes. Before the words left her lips, he gently pulled me to my feet. "Come," he said softly. "Let's get you away from here. You need rest. Real rest." And for the first time since Vorlag, I didn't immediately try to pull away. I let him lead me, which I realized was maybe the most dangerous thing I'd done all night. Where was this path leading me? And did I even want to know? Her hand in his was small, trembling, but she hadn't pulled away. Victory. A small one. Yes, but more significant than defeating a dozen shadow claws. Because this wasn't about power or dominance. This was about her, Elara, his mate. The mark tingled on his soul. A silent song of recognition, of rightness. He led her from the den, ordering his most trusted warriors, the ones who had arrived with him and were now dealing with the dead guards outside, to cleanse the place and double the watch. He took Elara to his private alpha's chambers, deeper within the enclave, a place no one entered without his explicit permission. It was simpler than the main den, but secure, warm, and filled with his scent. He hoped it would soothe her. He watched as she looked around. "No one will harm you here, Elara," he said, his voice a low vow. "I swear it." He saw the doubt still lingering in her eyes. And why wouldn't it be? He was an alpha. She was a rogue. Their worlds were meant to collide in violence, not this fragile, uncertain connection. Vorlag, He used that boy's carving to hurt you specifically, didn't he? He asked gently, remembering the tiny wooden bird and the way she'd shattered. Elara flinched, her hand going to her tunic over the moon's tear. Her voice trembled. My brother, Laris, he made those. Before Vorlag, before everything. Tears welled, and this time, she didn't fight them. They traced paths down her dirt-streaked cheeks. His chest ached, for her, a fierce, protective pang. He wanted to pull her into his arms, to absorb her pain, to promise her a world where such horrors didn't exist. But then, he knew she wasn't ready for that. Not yet. Instead, he just stood there, a silent sentinel, letting her grieve. Vorlag will pay for that, Elara, he said, his voice soft but laced with deadly intent. For Laris, for your family, for what he's done to you, for what he's done to my pack. She looked up then, her eyes searching his. Why? She whispered. Why would you care about my family? About me? I'm just a rogue, a burden. The air thickened. He stepped closer, unable to resist. You are not a burden, Elara, he said, his voice husky. You are my mate. There. He'd said it again, the truth of it settling over them, heavy and profound. And what touches my mate, touches me, touches my pack. He saw the conflict in her eyes, the fear, the disbelief, but also a flicker of something else, something that might one day be acceptance, hope. Before she could speak, before she could retreat again, he gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering for a heartbeat too long against her cheek. The space between them burned. Get some sleep, Elara. You're safe now. Truly safe. He turned to leave, to give her that space, but a small voice stopped him. Kaelen? He turned back. Thank you, she whispered, so low he almost didn't hear it. For the snakes. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Any time, Elara. As he left her then, he knew, with a certainty that resonated deep in his soul, that he would move mountains, fight legions, tear down the sky itself to keep that fragile flicker of trust, that soft, thank you, alive. Because she was worth it. She was worth everything. The fight against Vorlag was far from over, but tonight, something had shifted, something profound, and it started with a girl who hated snakes, and an alpha who was finally beginning to understand what it truly meant to have a mate. The blood moon was coming, and with it, a reckoning. But now, he wouldn't face it alone, and neither, he hoped, would she.
The blood moon hung above us like a fresh wound in the dark sky, its crimson light painting the ancient stones of the bloodwood altar in shades of nightmare. And then, Kaelen squeezed my hand, his touch a brief, hot reassurance. Ready? He'd murmured, his golden eyes reflecting the terrible moon. I'd nodded, my throat too tight for words. Our plan was desperate, a wild gamble, to lure Vorlag here, to this place of old power, where we hoped the combined strength of our bond and the moon's tear could finally end him. Because of that, we'd positioned SilverMoon's best warriors in the shadows, ready to spring the trap. But then, as Vorlag's dark shape appeared at the edge of the clearing, not alone as we'd hoped, but with a chillingly large force of his shadow-claw brutes, a cold tendril of fear wrapped around my heart. Something was wrong. Terribly, terribly wrong. He didn't walk into our trap. Instead, with a cruel, knowing smile that glittered in the bloody moonlight, Vorlag gestured. And then the world exploded. Not with shadow claws attacking from the front, no, but from the sides, from behind us, from places our scouts had sworn were clear. Her world tilted. How could he know? It was an ambush within an ambush. Our warriors, caught completely by surprise, roared in fury and pain. What followed was chaos, the stench of blood, the screams of the dying, the sickening crunch of bone. Kaelen was a golden-brown storm of rage beside me, fighting like a demon, his claws tearing through shadow claws. Yet, for everyone he took down, and 2 more seemed to take its place. She didn't know what scared her more: the sheer number of them, or the dawning, horrifying realization that our carefully laid plan had just become our coffin. I fought too, my knife a silver flicker, my small size an advantage as I ducked and weaved. But then, I saw Lyra fall, her kind eyes wide with shock. And then, Finn, his quiet strength silenced forever. Grief, sharp and suffocating, tore through me. To make things worse, Vorlag wasn't even in the fight. He stood apart, watching, his arms crossed, that terrible smile wider now. He was enjoying this. He was enjoying our suffering. With every heartbeat, our numbers dwindled. We were being herded, separated. Kaelen and I pushed further and further away from any hope of support. Soon after, Vorlag finally made his move, but not for Kaelen. No! He came for me! Kaelen roared, trying to get to me, but 2 massive shadow claws slammed into him, bearing him down with their sheer weight. Kaelen! I screamed his name, a raw sound of pure terror. As if pulled by a string. I tried to reach him, to help him. But then, Vorlag was there, blocking my path, his eyes like chips of ice. Such spirit, little wolf, he purred, his voice a silken threat. And such a pretty trinket. His gaze dropped to the moon's tear, which pulsed weakly against my skin, as if sensing his vileness. I raised my knife. Maybe it was fate that he just laughed. That toy won't help you now? And then, he lifted a hand, not to strike, but holding a small obsidian shard, black as a starless night. It pulsed with a sickening anti-magic that I felt even before he spoke. An old trinket of my own, he said. It does so dislike other little lights. Without warning, he crushed the shard in his fist, and just like that, everything changed. The warmth from the moon's tear vanished, snuffed out, like a candle in a hurricane. The faint light it always held, the connection I'd started to feel to its power, it just died. My strength, the enhanced senses, the surge of hope it had given me, all gone. I felt empty, weak, just a rogue again. A terrified, helpless rogue. Because of that, when his warriors grabbed me, their claws digging into my arms, I barely struggled. What was the use? My power was gone. Kaelen was down, a pained snarl ripped from him as a shadow claw struck his head. His body going still. Oh gods, so terribly still. In that moment, as they dragged me towards the blood-stained altar where Vorlag waited, Kaelen a fallen shape in the crimson moonlight, something inside me shattered. The silence roared, louder than any battle cry. Hope? It was a cruel joke. Love? A weakness Vorlag had exploited perfectly. Her chest ached, with a pain so vast, so complete. It stole my breath. Because this was it. This was how it ended. Not in a blaze of glory, not fighting side by side with my mate, but like this. Broken. Powerless. Alone. Again. Just like with my family. The same terror, the same helplessness, the same stench of death and despair. Deep down, she knew the truth. I had failed. Failed Kaelen, failed his pack, failed my mother's memory, failed the moon's tear. What was the point of surviving Vorlag once, only to be brought to this? As if the world narrowed, to just Vorlag's triumphant face and Kaelen's still form. I felt a single tear escape, tracing a path through the grime and blood on my cheek. Vorlag began to chant then, his voice rising in an ancient guttural language, the blood moon casting his shadow long and monstrous over me, over Kaelen, over the dead. The ritual. It was starting. And she let it happen. That one tear. because what else was there left to do? Was this how my story was meant to end? A sacrifice on a bloody altar. My only legacy, the echo of screams and the triumph of a monster. The wind carried his name, Kaelen, but it was just a whisper now, lost in the rising tide of Vorlag's dark power.
Elara's POV. That single tear, it traced a cold path down my cheek, a final surrender. And then, Vorlag's chant, ugly and ancient, filled the blood-soaked air of the bloodwood altar. Kaelen lay so still, a broken shape in the terrible crimson light of the blood moon. My mate. The word was an ache, a raw wound in my soul. Because of that, what was the point of fighting anymore? The moon's tear was dead against my skin, a cold, useless stone. My power, if I ever truly had any, was gone. Vorlag had won. He had crushed the obsidian shard, and with it, he'd crushed my hope, my strength, everything. Or so I thought. But then, as Vorlag's voice rose higher, his words twisting the very air around us, a memory surfaced. Kaelen, not the fierce alpha, but Kaelen in his den, his golden eyes soft, telling me, "You are SilverMoon now, Elara. We do not abandon our own." He'd said it with such conviction, such faith in me, a rogue, a nobody. And then, another memory, his hand in mine, warm and strong after the snake attack, his quiet voice, "You're safe now, truly safe." He had fought for me, bled for me, believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself. As if the world narrowed to that one truth, a tiny, stubborn spark ignited in the deepest, coldest part of my heart. Love. It was love, wasn't it? This fierce, aching thing I felt for him, for the alpha who had shown me. Kindness. Her wolf stirred, a faint nudge against my ribs, a whisper of, "Mate, fight." Maybe it was fate, or maybe it was just the last desperate beat of a dying heart. But I knew then that Vorlag couldn't have it all. He couldn't have Kaelen. He couldn't have me, not while I still drew breath. The moon's tear. Its power wasn't just in the stone, was it? Kaelen had said it was tied to the bearer's spirit, to Luna's true power. And what was truer than this desperate burning need to protect, to save, to fight for the one I loved. Her soul answered. The tear. It pulsed. Just once, a faint, defiant warmth against my skin. Hope. Oh gods, was that hope? Without thinking, my gaze, no longer dull with despair but sharp with a new wild resolve, locked onto Vorlag. He was deep in his chant, his eyes closed, his hands raised to the bloody moon. Now! If I was going to do something, it had to be now. The leather thongs binding my wrists were tight, cutting into my skin. But then, years of being a rogue, of escaping traps like had taught me a few things. I twisted, a sharp, agonizing wrench. Pain shot up my arm, but one hand came free. Just like that, I was moving. My knife was gone, lost in the battle. But then, Vorlag's ritual circle. It was littered with discarded weapons from the fallen SilverMoon warriors. Her body moved on instinct. I dove for the nearest, a heavy iron dagger, its hilt still warm from its owner's grip. As if pulled by a string, Vorlag's eyes snapped open, his chant breaking. He saw me. He saw the dagger. He snarled, a sound of pure fury. "Insolent cur, you cannot stop what has begun." But I could try. I lunged, not at him, but at one of the carved totems that seemed to be channeling the blood moon's energy into his ritual, hoping to break the circle, to cause a distraction. What followed was a desperate, clumsy fight. I was weak, he was powerful. His Shadowclaw guards, the ones not holding Kaelen, moved to intercept me. But then, a roar, a true alpha roar, weak, but filled with an impossible fury. Kaelen, he was moving. As if fate demanded it, he'd thrown off the two guards holding him, his eyes blazing gold, fixed on me, then on Vorlag, He was injured, bleeding from a dozen wounds, but he was on his feet. Elara. When her name left his lips, it was a battle cry. And then, the surviving SilverMoon warriors, those few who hadn't fallen, they heard it too. They saw Kaelen rise, they saw me, a lone rogue, fighting back, and something inside them shifted. With renewed howls, they surged forward, crashing into Vorlag's remaining forces. The tension broke into open, desperate war once more. I used the chaos. I dodged a guard, his claws raking my arm, and scrambled towards Kaelen. He met me halfway, his strong arm wrapping around me, pulling me against his battered side. "You crazy, magnificent wolf," he gasped, his breath hot against my ear, his scent, pine and blood and pure Kaelen, flooding my senses. The space between them burned, not with just the mate bond, but with shared desperation, shared resolve. The moon's tear pulsed again, stronger this time, a steady warm thrum against my heart. It was alive. I was alive, and Kaelen was alive. Was it enough? Could we actually win this? Kaelen's POV integrated smoothly. Pain, red searing pain. And then, through the roaring in his ears, a sound. Elara's name, but not from his own lips. Vorlag. He was talking to Elara. His wolf surged, a desperate primal need to protect her, to get to her. He fought against the blackness, against the crushing weight of unconsciousness. Because of that, he heard her. A snarl, the clang of steel, Elara. She was fighting, alone. That thought, more than any pain, dragged him back to the bloody reality of the altar. He forced his eyes open, saw her, a small, fierce whirlwind with a dagger, a desperate light in her eyes, saw Vorlag, his face contorted in rage, saw his few remaining warriors battered but still on their feet, their hope rekindled by her impossible defiance. "Elara!" he roared, the sound tearing from his throat, fueled by agony and a love so fierce it was a physical force. He threw off the stunned guards. He got to his feet. The world spun, but he locked his gaze on her, his mate, his fierce, unbroken Luna. Elara's POV. "We need a new plan," Kaelen rasped, his arm tight around me, his body leaning heavily against mine. He was hurt badly, but his eyes were all alpha, all fight. His ritual, it's drawing power from the moon, but also from the blood spilled here, from the fallen. He gestured weakly to our dead. Her chest ached. How could Vorlag be so vile? "The totems," I said, my mind racing, the tear now a steady, reassuring warmth. When I struck one, his chant faltered, the energy, it flickered. Could it be that simple? Or that desperate? Kaelen looked at me. Truly looked. Not just as his mate, but as a warrior. A partner. "The totems are his anchors, then," he said, his voice gaining strength. "If we can destroy them, all of them, before the moon reaches its zenith, we break his power." I finished, a wild, improbable hope taking root. We stopped the ritual. It was insane. There were at least 5 totems, pulsating with that ugly red light, and Vorlag was now a raging beast, his shadow claws forming a protective ring around him and the altar. Still, what other choice did we have? Surrender was death, a slow, agonizing death for me, and a brutal one for Kaelen and what was left of SilverMoon. More importantly, this was our fight now, not just his, not just mine, ours. With a single glance between us, a new vow was made, unspoken but absolute. We would face this together. We would win, or we would die trying. The few remaining SilverMoon warriors, drawn by Kaelen's presence, by the desperate hope in my eyes, gathered around us, their faces grim but resolute. As if the forest watched, a hush fell over our small, battered group. And then, Kaelen, leaning on me for support but his voice pure alpha command, began to issue orders. This was it, our last stand, our only chance. And as we prepared to move, I clutched the moon's tear, its warmth spreading through me, a silent promise against the bloody light of the unforgiving moon.
The bloodwood altar pulsed with that terrible crimson light, and Vorlag stood at its center, his eyes blazing with a mad power. And then, Kaelen gave the signal, a sharp, almost silent flick of his ears. Our small, battered group of SilverMoon warriors moved as one, a wave of desperate courage against a tide of Shadowclaw brutes. My heart hammered, against my ribs, not with just fear anymore, but with a wild, fierce determination. Because of that, the moon's tear against my skin felt like a living fire, a thrumming extension of my own will, of my love for Kaelen, of my desperate need to protect this pack that was becoming mine. I saw Kaelen, a golden-brown fury, crash into Vorlag's personal guard, his roars shaking the very stones. My body moved on instinct. My target, the totems, the anchors of Vorlag's sickening ritual. As if pulled by a string, I dodged a lunging Shadowclaw, my borrowed dagger a silver flash in the bloody moonlight, and slammed it into the nearest pulsating totem. Wood splintered. Dark energy screamed. And then, Vorlag stumbled, his chant breaking for a heartbeat. Yes. More importantly, it gave Kaelen an opening. He drove one of Vorlag's guards back, his eyes meeting mine for a fraction of a second. That look, it was pure trust, pure partnership. It fueled me. Another totem. I had to reach another. But then, a huge Shadowclaw blocked my path, its yellow eyes filled with malice, its claws dripping with something dark. She didn't know what scared her more, its size, or the way it grinned, like it knew my deepest fears. Elara. She was a whirlwind of fierce grace, her movements quick, precise, her small form belying the incredible courage that blazed from her. He felt it, clear as day. Her determination, her love, pulsing through their bond, strengthening him even as his old wounds screamed in protest. He saw her strike the first totem, and then he felt Vorlag's power flicker, a brief falter in the suffocating aura of dark magic. She was right. The totems were key. His wolf surged with a savage pride. That was his mate, his Lunar. Because of that, he fought with renewed ferocity, tearing through Vorlag's guards, trying to clear a path for her, to protect her. But then, he saw the massive brute cornering her. Rage, cold and absolute, flooded him. He was too far away, tangled with two other Shadowclaws. "Elara!" he roared, a desperate prayer and a furious command all in one. No matter how hard she tried, that big one was strong, its claws raking her arm, pain searing through her. She cried out, stumbling back. But then, from the corner of her eye, she saw him, Kaelen. He disengaged, taking a brutal slash across his ribs to do it, but he was coming. His eyes, those golden alpha eyes, were locked on her attacker, blazing with a promise of utter annihilation. The space between them burned with their bond. And then, the moon's tear, it flared. Not with just warmth this time, but with a brilliant, pure silver light that seemed to push back the blood moon's oppressive crimson. Power surged through Elara, not her own, but something ancient, something connected to the moon, to the earth, to Kaelen. As if fate demanded it. She raised her hands, the light pouring from the tear, from her, striking the huge Shadowclaw. It howled, smoke rising from its fur where the light touched. And then it simply dissolved into black ash. Just like that. Gone. I stared at my hands, at the fading silver light. What? What was that? Before she could move, Kaelen was there, his strong arm around her, his scent, his presence, an anchor. "The totems, Elara," he urged, his voice rough. "Together!" And then, they moved as one. He cleared the path with his savage strength, his claws and fangs a blur. And I, empowered by the tear, by our bond, by a love that was now an unbreakable shield, I struck the remaining totems. One by one they shattered, their dark energy screaming into the night. With every heartbeat, Vorlag's power visibly waned, his roars of fury turning into gasps of disbelief. Finally, only one totem remained, the one closest to the altar where Vorlag himself now stood, his face a mask of hate. "You cannot stop me!" he shrieked, lunging for me, his claws extended. But Kaelen was there! He met Vorlag's charge with a roar that was pure alpha, pure mate, pure protector. Their battle was titanic, a clash of primal forces under the dying blood moon. And then, I saw my chance. While Vorlag was locked with Kaelen, I raised the moon's tear, its silver light now a blazing spear. I focused all my will, all my love for Kaelen, all my pain from the past, into it. "For my family," I screamed. "For SilverMoon, for Kaelen." And then, I unleashed it. The silver light struck Vorlag. He screamed, a sound that was not wolf, not human, but something utterly damned. And then, he too began to dissolve, his dark power unraveling like smoke in the wind, until nothing remained but the stench of his evil and the sudden, blessed silence of the bloodwood altar. In the quiet that followed, Kaelen swayed, his body screaming from a dozen wounds. But then, strong, slender arms were around him, holding him up. Elara. Her face was smudged with dirt and blood, her eyes wide and luminous, the moon's tear glowing softly against her chest like a captured star. "We did it," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Kaelen, we did it." He looked around. The surviving shadow claws were fleeing or surrendering to his exhausted but triumphant warriors. The crimson light of the blood moon was fading, giving way to the soft, gentle gray of pre-dawn. Vorlag was gone, truly gone. His chest ached, not from his wounds, but with a wave of emotion so powerful it almost brought him to his knees. Love, gratitude, awe for this incredible, fierce she-wolf, his mate, his Luna. "Yes, Elara," he managed, his voice thick. "We did." He leaned his forehead against hers, their mingled scents a balm to his battered soul. The air, no longer thick with dark magic, now tasted of pine, of damp earth, and of hope. The long night was over. The losses were heavy. He could feel the grief already starting to press in on the edges of their victory. Many brave SilverMoon warriors had fallen. But because of her, because of their bond, because of the light she carried, his pack had survived. They had a future. They had a future. Moments later, or maybe it was hours, the sun began to paint the eastern sky in hues of rose and gold. The SilverMoon warriors were tending to their wounded, their faces grim, but their eyes holding a new light. Kaelen, leaning heavily on me and his loyal beta, Jax, who had somehow survived, surveyed the scene. The cost had been terrible. I saw fresh tears on old, weathered faces as they counted their dead. My own heart ached for their losses, for the pain Vorlag had inflicted. But then, I also saw something else. Hope. A fragile, newborn hope. As the sun fully rose, its clean light chasing away the last of the blood moon's oppressive shadows, Kaelen turned to me. His hand, calloused and strong, gently cupped my cheek. "Thank you, Elara," he said, his golden eyes filled with an emotion so deep, so profound, it stole my breath. "You saved us. You saved me." Before the words left her lips, I knew what I had to say. "No, Kaelen," I whispered, my hand covering his. "We saved each other." And in that moment, standing amidst the wreckage of battle, with the promise of a new day dawning, I knew it was true. The chains of my past, the fear, the isolation, they were finally, truly, beginning to break. The moon's tear was cool against my skin now, its light soft and peaceful. It wasn't a burden. It was a part of me. Just as Kaelen was, just as SilverMoon, this brave, battered pack, was becoming. My world tilted, not in fear this time, but with the dizzying, terrifying, wonderful possibility of home. And just like that, everything changed. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. There was so much healing to do. For the pack, for Kaelen, for myself. Still, as he smiled, a true, unguarded smile that reached his beautiful golden eyes, I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that we would face it all, together. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I wasn't afraid. I was ready.
This story was a wild ride, wasn't it? From Elara's heartbreaking choice to the mountain pack finding its true strength, it's a tale of love, betrayal, and redemption. If you were captivated by the raw emotions and the untamed spirit of this world, you're in luck. You can dive even deeper into the world of shifters and fated mates. We've got more stories that will make your heart race and leave you begging for more. But hey, if you're ready to shift gears entirely, why not check out some of our other videos? Whether you're craving more passionate tales or something completely new, there's always an adventure waiting for you right here on the channel. Don't go anywhere. Keep exploring.